Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the 6th workshop for Community Companions. I'm your host and project coordinator Zebunissa Rao, and I'm really happy to see you all here today. My co-host today is Farzana Siddiqui. Assalamu alaikum. Sister Farzana is a trained counsellor from Relate, has worked in Northern Ireland and Richmond, and is a valuable member of our project. Community Companions is a project of Hounslow Muslim Centre designed to support the elderly and vulnerable in our community. Today is the 6th workshop in a series to help engage and empower the elders in our community in matters related to medicine, mental health, hobbies, and social activities. If you have any questions or ideas for future workshops, these can be submitted via the links mentioned in the chat room. You'll find details of the project email address and a phone number if you'd like to be added to the WhatsApp group for the workshops. Our guest today is Dr. Naveed Sayed. Assalamu alaikum. Dr. Naveed is consultant to Public Health England in communicable diseases. He studied medicine at Manchester University, has a postgraduate diploma in medical education and a master's in public health. He was advisor for 2 years to the British High Commission in Pakistan. Dr. Naveed will talk about the topic of interest today, and then we'll later open for questions and answers. And today the title of the presentation is Travel and Health in the Wake of the Pandemic, Make the Best Decisions and Take the Necessary Precautions. It has been 1.5 years since the pandemic began and changed our lives beyond recognition. Normal everyday activities were suddenly ended and replaced with social isolation and fear. In terms of recreation and relaxation, walks outside were limited and even local day trips were a thing of the past. It was difficult to hear that Hajj and Umrah were partially cancelled and only bearable because it was for the benefit of preventing the spread of the virus. Now that things are slowly returning back to some normality, there is a desire to do everything we have longed to do, while at the same time a fear of whether it is indeed safe. There are red, green and amber lists and various procedures for quarantine. What sense can we make of all the holiday choices on offer, the information and regulations that exist, and what can we do to keep safe? Over to you, Dr. Naveed.
Thank you very much. This is Malcolm Rahim, and thank you for inviting me. Again, it's a really important topic, and most of us have forgotten what it's like to travel because we've all been at home, and the travel restrictions for the vast majority of the community, except for really, serious emergencies, and so it's been a very tough time for everyone, and I do accept that. So what I wanted just to talk about was not just around travel issues related to COVID, which are important, and we'll cover them in terms of some of the questions, no doubt, but also just give people more of a sort of a grounding around general travel advice and health. So not just in COVID times, but hopefully something that they can take away for all sorts of travel, which may include sort of religious travel or holidays, as well as just going back to see family and friends. So there's a lot of things around that which are quite important, just in terms of how we make sure that our travel is enjoyable, that we remain healthy, and we come back safely. And we all want that. None of us want to go and be ill and to be ill abroad. And thankfully here we have a wonderful health system that can look after us, but we can't guarantee in other places how well we will be looked after. So it's important to take the right precautions. So I'll sort of briefly go over those things, and then also I'll sort of later on maybe give a list of your essential travel kit, things that all of us, when we're traveling, should at least pack. And they're just sensible things, but sometimes you overlook them. So I'll go through them slowly so people can write them down, and certainly you can share those later on, because they're just very sensible things. But again, travel, it's something that we do that's not our normal activity. Our normal activities, whether it's school, work, voluntary stuff, or working, moving around in the community, it's things that we get on with and we do on a normal day-to-day basis. Travel almost by itself means it's something special. It's something that you need to prepare for. It's something that happens out of the ordinary. So we shouldn't take travel very lightly. Some people they over prepare and they get really anxious about it. So hopefully some of what I'm going to be talking about will help them put things into context. Other people are very sort of lastminute.com type people. And again, it's maybe just saying to them, those types of people on that spectrum, perhaps a bit of foresight and planning will really make your travel journey very healthy, happy, and safe. So there are things that we all need to do before we travel. There are things that we need to do whilst we're out to whatever destination we're at. And there are things that we need to do when we come back, and it's all linked to travel health. And I mean, it depends on the questions. I can go sort of more into some of the specific religious aspects of travel for Hajj and Umrah if you want. But like you say, that's probably not going to be relevant in the immediate future, because again, this year, quite rightly, the authorities that govern the two holy sites, they have restricted entries quite markedly. So there's very few people, maybe 60,000 they were saying, I think I read somewhere, people who are non-Saudi nationals will be allowed for the Hajj. And certainly, so it's not that Hajj has been banned or in that respect. We had Hajj last year. We're going to have Hajj this year as an ummah, but quite rightly, the authorities are taking necessary precautions, because as you can imagine, bringing in lots of people from all over the globe into one place, that has the potential to be sort of the focal point for spreading out infection. So we can talk about those things perhaps later if that would interest people. But a lot of what I'm going to say is just sensible advice, which we all know, but I think sometimes we need to be reminded. So, if we are going on I mean, there are two types of travel advice, essentially. One is for people who are fit and well, and there's others for people who have underlying medical conditions. And certainly for those, they need to take extra precautions, and I'm happy to dwell on those, because obviously that's a large part of the people who will be listening or interacting with today's session. But generally, whenever we travel, it provides a bit of stress, and we're not just going to go and just sort of lounge around. There will be a bit of activity and something out of the ordinary. So we need to make sure that our body is in the right condition. So pre-travel, it's really important that we increase our fitness. We potentially go for walks in the evening, or we do a bit of exercise, just to prepare our body a few weeks beforehand for whatever travel journey that we're going to embark upon. So it's really important that we start a bit of fitness in maybe the 4 to 6 weeks before we travel, so that when we are out there, we can pick up and we've sort of honed our sort of walking muscles quite well, so we can enjoy things more and we don't get too stressed out. And linked to that, and again, it's obvious, it's a good diet, good diet and a bit of exercise, because we just need to be nutritionally well. And again, it's just sticking to the rules that the Prophet ﷺ told us. When you eat in thirds, or a Muslim eats in thirds: a third food, a third water, and a third is left for air. And we don't overindulge, and we don't pack things through, and we don't sort of binge ourselves in the day or two beforehand. So that those things that we should be thinking about our travel plans, and a month or two beforehand, think about exercise, a better diet. And then we should we know our destination. If we're going to go to a very hot climate, or a very cold climate, or a wet climate, and we just need to think, well, how would I be in that environment? What do I need to prepare for that environment? Certainly if we're going, and a lot of people from here tend to go and to a hot climate, because we don't really have much of a summer here. Certainly we've got a nice couple of days, certainly now, but we've had to wait to June to get a couple of nice days. So there is the tendency to go there, but again, we need to prepare for being a few weeks in a very hot environment. So again, I can talk about some of those things. We need to know our own health, which is really critical. And especially if we have underlying chronic illnesses, it's to know how to manage our health and just basic things, know our disease, know what medication we're on, and just simple stuff like having a wrist bracelet or a medic ID sheet that we always carry that lists our medication. That is really critical and important. And if we're under some specialist care at in a hospital, then we need to have the number of our specialist consultant or the specialist nurse. Our hospital, if you can, your hospital ID number or contact number for the hospital. So these are the things that we need to have written down, because if we're out and about in a foreign country and then suddenly, we do find that we need our health looking after and things get critical, we need to be able to get back in touch with the specialists who know our health needs. So that those are really critical things that we need to plan for. And the other thing that I would say in terms of planning, especially if we have underlying chronic illnesses, is to see or have a conversation with your family doctor or your practice nurse or your specialist nurse that looks after your healthcare. So if we've got diabetes, we have a diabetic specialist nurse. You might have a cardiac specialist nurse. If you've got blood pressure or other issues, or you might have a asthma or respiratory specialist nurse, have a conversation with them before we go out. So again, book an appointment a few weeks before you go out, just to for them to give you the MOT and to give you advice around what to do when you're out there. The other things is certainly for our ladies, it is about planning that if they are having their menses, how they're going to manage those things. And certainly we think about those if we're going for Hajj or Umrah, because we don't want to spoil the ibadah, but also we need to think about those. If you're going for a long holiday where you don't want those things to disrupt your holidays, so think about how you can plan for those types of things, those women's issues which are important. And then people say that make sure you've got your travel insurance or your health insurance when you're going abroad. But the other really important thing is making sure our relatives and our loved ones here know how to contact us, and so we maintain that two-way communication. It's not a complete holiday from them. They need to know where we're going and generally our itinerary, so that they can we can check back and they can check on us. So these are things that we should be doing before we go out. And then the other important things are what vaccinations you may need. Now, we're all quite familiar with the fact that if we are going for Hajj or Umrah, that we need to have our meningitis vaccines, which is quite right, because I think sort of 2001 or 2002, there was a large outbreak of meningitis that centered around people visiting for Hajj, and they went back, and quite a lot of people died because of that. And then following that, they made it mandatory that people needed to have the meningitis vaccine, and now it's the quadrivalent meningitis vaccine, the 4-in-1, which is mandated for your visa. So we're familiar with that, but wherever we go, again, we should have the conversation with our family doctors about, are there any other vaccines I need to have? If we're old and vulnerable, then you may need your flu vaccine. Are you up to date with your hepatitis A or your hepatitis B vaccines? There's rabies, yellow fever, diphtheria, tetanus, typhoid, these types of things. We need to have that conversation. And there is a website which is actually, I mean, there are a couple of websites. There's your travel centres, but then there's also what I would recommend, and what the government recommends, is something called NATHNAC, NATHNAC. I can't remember what it's called. Something like National Travel and Health Advice. So NATHNAC. They provide really good resources around where you're planning to go, what diseases are there over there, what vaccines you need to do, and also a lot of the stuff that I'll be talking about. I haven't actually visited their website recently, but a lot of the stuff I'll be talking about, I can imagine will be on that website, because it's general travel advice, really. So that's that's a really important resource, NATHNAC. Now, the other thing, and I'll stop after this, and then we can talk about. I'll be open for questions. But also, the other thing in terms of preparation, certainly for those who have chronic illnesses or underlying illnesses, is like your diabetes, asthma, or heart disease, is that you need to, before you go, take plenty of your medication. And certainly in COVID times, if a travel ban happens, or if travel is more restricted, you may be stranded, and you need to make sure you've got enough medication. So take, and this is generally for all forms of travel. If you're going out for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, don't just take 3 weeks of medicines. I would say take at least 5 or 6 weeks of medicines, because you don't know, if whatever happens, things may get delayed. So you do need to make sure you've got plenty of medicines. Make sure you've got a repeat prescription form. So that's, shows what medicines you would need should they run out. Again, sensible things like make sure you take your medicines. I know it's a bit of a hassle. Make sure you take your medicines in your hand luggage. Don't put them in your main luggage that's going to be stowed away in the cabin, because we all know, either we've experienced it or we know people who have had their luggage lost. So if that happens, that may be a potential disaster if you are on regular medications. So if you have it in your hand luggage, it's traveling with you. So that's what I would recommend, is take your medicines in your hand luggage, and then take a covering letter with that, because again, you may get questioned at the airport, and you show them that the covering letter, if it's from your family doctor, etc., or your specialists, that these are why you're taking your medication. And like I said, have your on that sheet also have your specialist consultant name, their contact number, or their secretary's contact number. Have the hospital number, the phone number, have your NHS number. Have those things written down. And again, if you've got specific diseases, for example, like diabetes, and a lot of our community, especially in the older generation, do have it. You need to know what a hypo feels like, or what it is, or what to look out for when your sugar is running low. And therefore, what you need to do when your sugar is running low, when you're having a hypo attack, make sure, if you're diabetic, you take with you sugary snacks, right? Chocolates or other things which will give you the burst of sugar should you be feeling you're going into a hypo. And as I said, travel can be stressful, and the stress of travel in itself can exacerbate some of these things, not just diabetes. Again, with your insulin, make sure that if you're taking insulin, you've got that it's stored in the fridge, that you've got fridge facilities wherever you're going. ask about that in advance. If you're going to hotels, make sure that you request that, or that it's provided. If you're going to other places, or family and friends, do specifically say this is one of your requirements, that's where you want to store it. Take plenty of spare needles. You want to be using your own needles that are safe. Again, if you're diabetic, a medical alert bracelet or some ID that you carry with you, should you have a hypo or you faint, it's really critical to alert people around you that you've got this medical problem. Other things, not just diabetes, but say asthma, make sure you've got enough inhalers with you, the right inhalers. If you're got heart problems, make sure you've got your heart spray, that if you have angina, your GTN spray. So these are the things, even if you've not had an attack, an angina attack or an asthma attack in recent months, still make sure you have it with you. So it's about being prepared. And the other thing about being prepared is, again, a few months before you travel, see a dentist, make an appointment with your dentist, make sure your oral health is good. You don't want to end up with a really bad toothache, and you don't want to end up seeing a dentist in some of these other destinations where you can't necessarily trust that their adherence to good dental practice is as good as what you expect here in the UK. So see your dentist. If you know you're going to be doing a lot of walking, for example, on Hajj, we can talk about that. But if you know you're going to be doing a lot of walking, make sure you've got good footwear, especially if you're diabetic. And sandals. Please don't buy new sandals the week before you go out. Buy good footwear, sandals or walking boots, 3 or 4 months before you go, and then you walk them in for those 3 or 4 months before you travel, because then they will be fitted well, and you're not going to be getting the blisters or anything like that because you've been wearing them beforehand. So whether they're walking boots or sandals, don't get them the week before you go out. Get them a few months before and wear them in. I say, especially if you're diabetic. And again, you need to think about your wheelchairs or your walking sticks and how you're going to have your travel around that. So that's sort of basically just to start off with, just preparing to go out. And then there's other things, obviously, in the COVID environment, just making sure you've got enough sanitizer with you, make sure you've got enough face masks and the right type of face mask. So not just your cotton masks, but your surgical type masks that are good fitting, and especially for the period where you're traveling to the airport, where you're at the airport, and for your journey in the airplane where you are at highest risk. Make sure that you've got good fitting and a lot of replaceable surgical type masks, and you have your own hand sanitizer with you at all times for, as I say, all the touch points that you'll be doing at the airport and in the airplane, picking up your luggage, all of those things. It's really critical that we don't lose sight of those, because that's where a lot of the transfer of some of these viruses can happen. So I'll stop there, inshallah, and then open up to questions and maybe develop some of the other themes in the rest of the program.
Jazakallah khair. That's a very valuable talk that you've just given there. We have a lot of questions in the chat room, so I'll just try to go through one at a time. I think this is more based on Hajj and Umrah. What to do regarding walking? What precautions can you take during Hajj and Umrah? Walking, what type of medications, general medication for a healthy person? They're worried about the heat as well. So with hijab for Muslim women, how to manage that as well.
Okay.
Then there are more after that, but this is just to begin with.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so if everyone wants to get a pencil and paper and jot down what are the things I would recommend people to take, I'll come on to that in a couple of minutes. I've given you advance notice to grab a pen and paper. But just certainly in terms of walking for Hajj, Hajj does require, alhamdulillah, you know, I've been blessed that Allah's invited me there, and I had a really pleasant experience. And part of that is preparing, and you know you're going to be doing a lot of walking. So like I say, for the few weeks and months before, a lot of evening walks or early morning walks, if that's your thing, just to build up your strength. So that is really critical, that you build up your stamina, because you know you're going to be doing a lot of walking. And then the time of year at the moment, it is going to be hot. There's no doubt about that. So it's about taking the right clothing when you're there. And you can get some very good quality clothing that isn't heavy, especially for the ladies that need that you know, wear hijab, if they're worrying about that. There's a lot of modern fabrics which allow good air exchange. So again, look into that. Take advice from your specialist outlets that tend to those things. Headgear, you know, during the Hajj ceremony, you're not allowed, the men aren't allowed to wear anything on their head, but you know, we do say you need to take umbrellas with you. So it's really critical to have an umbrella, preferably not black, because that absorbs the heat and it radiates it as well. So have a nice reflective colored umbrella, a white, or you know, go for some other, you know, bright umbrella shade that you know is yours. And sometimes now tour operators, they will provide you with their bespoke umbrellas, but certainly take it's imperative to have umbrellas. It's imperative to have sun cream. If you're going for a Hajj, again, make sure it's odorless, and moisturizers are odorless, and your soap is odorless. And you will be walking a lot, so in the heat, so be aware of things like heat stroke. So you need to drink plenty of water, but also I would take what is what we call ORT, or oral rehydration therapy. So you can get those sachets, things like Diorolite, but that is actually quite expensive. But you can get, you know, a much more affordable ORT. Essentially, it's like half a spoon of salt, a couple of spoons of, or you know, more than a couple of tablespoons of sugar, half a teaspoon of salt in a liter or two of water. So that's a very basic, but again, you know, oral rehydration therapy and electrolytes is really important. Sunglasses is important, so you're not squinting and you're not having, because that can cause you headaches as well. So take a good pair of sunglasses or prescription sunglasses. Know that you're going to be in large crowds when you're going for your Hajj or your Umrah, and so you know, be aware that you are likely to pick up bugs from other people. So do what you can to mitigate that. Wear a face mask nowadays, certainly. Hand washing with soap and water, or take your sanitizer with you. If you are ill or are having a cough or a fever, then stay at home. You're ill, don't expose other people to your illness, and you have a responsibility to other people. And then if you know other people are ill, you know, get them to isolate. And you know, catching an illness is often outside our control. This is the qadr of Allah. We just need to accept that, even if it is a very important life event like Hajj or Umrah. Again, when you're out and about, just basic manners. We're not supposed to be coughing over people. We're not supposed to be spitting around. These things a good Muslim does not do. And again, you know, the basic things like catch it, bin it, kill it. You know, if you are coughing, cough into a tissue and dispose of the tissue, and then wash your hands. Right. So, you know, these are the basic things. If you can, travel at night or in the evenings, and not in the heat of the day. So when you are going to do your your necessary rituals, or even going into other hot environments, try to avoid the midday sun, right? It's just sensible. Go early in the morning or go late in the afternoon or early evening. Again, drink plenty of water. I mean, that is a must. Lots and lots of water. Now, going back onto your sort of essential kit, okay, pen and papers to the ready. Painkillers. So, your basic, over-the-counter painkillers. Have a box of paracetamol and ibuprofen, and I would take them both. They work in slightly different ways, and again, it's over the counter. You can get them from your local supermarket, 20-30 pence a box. So simple painkillers. Take an umbrella. If it's a hot climate or a wet climate, umbrellas are a must. Take sun cream, which has a high SPF factor, 50 or above. And again, it's not just a question of taking the sun cream, it's actually using it when you're out there. And so when you're going out, putting it on, especially when you're going to go out in the heat of the day. If you have children, make sure that they have it and they don't get sunburn either. So that is really important. As I said, I mentioned sunglasses is very important. And if you've got prescription glasses, try to take prescription sunglasses as well. That is actually quite important. I would recommend just a little bottle of clove oil for the toothache that some people get. So that's often useful. Plasters and bandages, just a little, again, a little packet of box of plasters of all sizes and/or bandages. It's a must if you're traveling, even to a low risk environment.
Sorry, can you just check the item previously was clove oil? Did you mention?
Yes, I mean, some people recommend that you can get these clove oil drops that some people find useful if they're having mild toothache. Alternatively, just take the cloves with you. Plasters and bandages, again, insect repellent. It's really important to get a good quality insect repellent, especially if you're going to a really hot climate where there are a lot of bugs. So good quality insect repellent, either cream or what I prefer is the spray. So you can spray it on your hands and then you rub it all over, or you can just spray it direct. So get insect repellent spray. Take some antiseptic cream. So if you do get some scratches or some cuts, you've got some antiseptic cream, like your Savlons type of thing. Have a tube of that. Perhaps, depending on where you're going, take some water sterilization tablets. You can get them from the chemist. So what they do is, even your local water that you're not sure about how safe it is, just use the water sterilization tablets, let that settle, and then you can have that. Like I mentioned, some oral rehydration therapy, some ORT, things like Diarrhelite are useful. If you're going for do a lot of walking, so for Hajj and especially and Umrah, or on your hiking journeys, take some Vaseline. And Vaseline is actually really important and overlooked. Your marathon runners use a lot of Vaseline because you can get a lot of chafing in areas which rub together. So in your groin areas or under your armpits, or even, people say, their nipples can get chafed if there's depending on what they're wearing. So Vaseline is actually quite important because it, as I say, it reduces the friction. Take some scissors or some blades, not in your hand luggage. You're going to get stopped at the airport with that. Put them in your main luggage, but have your own scissors or blades. Take some anti-diarrhea medication, so things like loperamide. So by and large, a lot of people will have problems with their tummy. They may get diarrhea. So I would recommend Hopefully you won't need it, but just take some anti-diarrhea tablets. And again, you can get them over the counter. Other things, especially if you're going for Hajj or Umrah, take some throat lozenges, because you know most people will get a sore throat, and these can be helpful for that. So some throat lozenges. If you're hard of hearing, make sure you've got your hearing aid batteries and spare batteries with you. And again, if you're caring for someone that you're taking, again, make sure you've got some spare batteries. Like I said, Vaseline and moisturizer or moisturizer. So take enough moisturizer, especially if you're in a hot climate, and especially like me, if you have dry skin, is I always have a moisturizer with me. And the other thing I forgot to mention earlier on is take some extra cash, because don't just, if you're planning a 2-week holiday, don't just plan your spend for those 2 weeks. Especially nowadays, things can get delayed. And what happens if the quarantine rules come in, or they bring in some new regulations, or your flight gets delayed or cancelled? Just make sure you've got enough cash for that extra delay. So they're the basic things I would say that we need to take if we're fitting well, and if we've got some underlying medical ailments. And obviously, if you've got chronic illnesses, you know, it's the things that we've already discussed around, you know, having that conversation with your family doctor, having that conversation with your specialist team or your specialist nurses. Is that okay?
Sorry, unmute there. It's Jazakallah khair. I've written the list in the chat room, and that's
Fantastic.
amazing. I think it covers everything, things I haven't even thought of. So it's amazing. Jazakallah khair. There's a question from Brother Yunus, and then I'll go back to the questions in the chat room. Yes, brother, if you could go ahead, Brother Yunus.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Naveed. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, good, thank you. How are you?
I'm not too bad. A couple of questions from my end is, you just mentioned about vaccines. I have just taken 2 vaccines of Pfizer. Does that like include, does that stop me from traveling abroad, or do I have to quarantine?
So having the vaccine is for your own protection, and it's got very little to do with traveling abroad. So I really welcome the fact, Yunus, that you've had both vaccines, and what the vaccine does, either Pfizer or AstraZeneca, they provide a really good protection for the person who's had the vaccine 2 weeks after the second vaccine. They're proven to reduce your chance of hospitalization. They're proven to reduce your chance of serious illness and of death. And so these things, it's critical that people who are eligible for the vaccine have the vaccine, and we're down to people in the 30s now, early 30s, 31, and so
I passed that anyway.
So people need to have their vaccine if they get called. So the rules around travel are separate to the rules around the vaccine. What I would recommend is, if you're traveling, is you can have a conversation with your travel provider. But the best thing to do is to start off with is just to go to the government website and look at travel. Just type in COVID travel UK regulations, and it will tell you the difference between your red, amber, and your green countries, and what you need to do. And it lays it out quite well in terms of what is expected.
Could you repeat that again? Where to find this information?
Oh, it's on the government website. So I would just go into Google and just type in travel regulations UK COVID, and you'll get it. And it's the .gov.uk website that has that. That's the trusted government website. So if it ends in .gov.uk.
And also my last question.
So go to that, and that outlines the quarantine requirements, because they change on a weekly basis. So you know the requirements for quarantine for red and amber, and when you need your COVID test, when you need your repeat test, when you have your pre-travel COVID test and your return travel COVID test, they're all outlined there. So as you would necessarily when planning your trip, that is one of the first things you would look at. So I don't want to go into the specific details for each of the countries, because I don't think it's the right place to do that. I would signpost you to that government website.
And also my last question on, you just mentioned quarantine. What's the maximum days you're supposed to quarantine?
Again, go on the government website, but it's a minimum of 10 days. But there are ways in which that can be reduced if you're traveling from certain countries and you take certain tests. And there is a difference between quarantining in a managed quarantine facility, which is essentially your hotel.
I think you've got a ghost behind you.
Certain people you can quarantine at home. So again, that is all outlined on the government website, and I think that's where I would get people to get the most up-to-date travel advice, because that's really critical.
Jazakallah, Doctor.
Martina has an interesting point that you can find out the specific types of masks required in the country that you're traveling to. So maybe they'll be on the same website as well.
Yes, good point.
There are other questions. If I just scroll back up again. One question is, if you have the Pfizer as the first dose and AstraZeneca as a second dose, is that okay? And why do we have to wait 8 to 12 weeks between doses?
Okay, that you know, obviously this is a slightly separate thing around the COVID vaccine, but by and large, what we recommend is that whichever first dose you had, you should try to have the same second dose, because that's what the government recommendations is. That's what the regulatory authorities recommend. However, they do say that they don't think that there is a problem in having a second dose which is slightly different. They are at the moment looking at trials, looking at the fact that some people have, say for example, Pfizer first, AstraZeneca second, or the other way around, and just to see how the immune response is based on those things. I don't think they've published that data, so that research is ongoing, but the advice is if that is what is being offered, then there's no harm in that, although the preference is to have the same second dose as your first dose.
Okay, and there's a question on menstruation if you travel for Hajj. Which pill is easier to take during Hajj and Umrah?
I would refer you back to your GP for that. It's not the question I often get asked, and I would normally refer them back to their family doctor, because again, your family doctor will know your health status, what medications you're currently on, and they will give you the best advice in terms of how to delay your menses, what works best for you at your age, in line with anything else that you're doing. And again, have that conversation with them beforehand, quite I would say a few months before you travel, because sometimes with some of these types of medication that involve your hormones, you may need to start quite in advance. Some others you may just need to start a week or two prior to travel. So again, have that conversation with your family doctor, explain to them because if they're not from a Muslim background, explain to them why it is necessary for you to delay your menses and why you want to do that, because they may not understand that, and then they can then give you the right advice and the right medication for that period of time. So to the best of your ability, it will delay that and it won't impact on your necessary rituals.
And how safe is it to travel for elders, and what extra precautions should they take?
Is that sort of it now or just generally? I mean, I think I'm hoping that most elders will have had both their COVID doses, but travel in itself is stressful, and we talked about that. Most people in the older age group have underlying medical conditions, so they're already vulnerable. And then on top of that, you're going into an environment where you are potentially interacting with a lot of other people that could potentially pass on illnesses if you're vulnerable. So there's no doubt it's far more riskier than staying at home. So you need to take the necessary precautions, and the things that I've mentioned are really important, that we need to ascertain how essential is the travel, and then do that risk benefit analysis, and then if people must travel, and I accept that there are occasions where they must travel, then it's doing all the sensible precautions. And again, especially nowadays in a COVID environment, is making sure that they have enough face masks, the right type of face masks, the fluid resistant surgical type masks that provide a decent seal around them. You've got enough spares so that it's not, you don't use the same one day after day. You have enough hand sanitizer that you can carry with you. And again, I'm not so it needs to be a little bottle that you carry with you, and that you have at the airport, that you can take on board with you. Most travel, most airliners will nowadays, when I've traveled recently, they will give you masks and sanitizers, but just make sure you have your own as well. Wipe down when you're going to sit at the airplane, wipe down where you're going to sit. Whenever you get up and leave, or wipe down your tray. Whenever you're going to the bathroom, wash your hands with soap and water before you leave and before you sit down. Again, wash your hands or sanitize before you have the food that's prepared. When I traveled last, they weren't providing us hot food. They were only providers with sort of cold snacks. And again, if that's a problem, make sure you've got your own snacks with you as well. So these types of things are important. And then obviously when you're disembarking, take your own pen, fill out your forms with your own pen. Again, sanitize. Don't touch the usual touch points that other people are touching. And it's just being sensible. If you're traveling with somebody, then get them to do all the things for you, and to allow your journey to be as stress-free as possible. So those are the things that I would recommend. The other thing to mention in the last couple of minutes is, so I talked about how to prepare before we go on a journey. I talked about what to do when you're out there, and certainly avoid the sun and all that type of thing. And it's also important to bear in mind what you need to do when you come back from Hajj or Umrah, or from a holiday abroad. So if you do have chronic illness and underlying illnesses, and you're on regular medication, you need to restart your regular medication, but preferably have a conversation with your family doctor on return to get back onto your maintenance dose, because things may have been altered. If you're diabetic, have a diabetic checkup, have your foot care checked. especially if you're going for Hajj or Umrah, because there's a lot of walking. I would book in a specialist check with your diabetic specialist nurse or your podiatrist to get your feet the once over. If you've got blood pressure issues, have your blood pressure checked when you're back. But when you're immediately back, and this is really important, give yourself a couple of days rest, because there's nothing worse than coming back on a Sunday evening and then being expected to go to work on a Monday morning, right? Plan it so that you have a couple of days off before you go back to your regular activities. Try and get as much sleep as possible, and especially if you're changing time zones, sleep is really critical. Make sure you eat and drink well on return, and especially drink enough fluids. That is critical, especially when you come back. And especially if you're coming back from Hajj and or Umrah, is have controlled visits. So like, what I mean by that is, we know that when people are ill in hospital, they only allow visiting hours between 6 and 9 p.m. When we coming back from Hajj or Umrah, I would recommend we have controlled visits, right? Where we say to people, if you want to do Mubarak Bads, then come between 6 and 8 o'clock, and then I'll be available. I'm not prepared to be getting, disturbed day and night with people visiting. So that is really critical, because then that allows the body time to recover and relax. So have these controlled visits, but also to be vigilant of symptoms upon our return. So firstly, when you return, have a conversation. If you do need to see a doctor with anything, let them know, oh, by the way, a couple of weeks ago, I went for Hajj, or I went for a religious Umrah, or I've been to Pakistan for a couple of weeks, or I've been to Morocco, or whatever. We need to mention that when we see the family doctor, because they're not clairvoyant. They don't know these things unless we tell them. And there are certain things which are more common upon return from holidays. It's not just upset tummy, your salmonellas, your typhoid fever, and things like that. So those things are common, but also look out for things like meningitis, right? So you can get get a rash, muscle aches, averseness to bright lights, or stiffness in your neck. These are classical signs of meningitis. So again, know those things. People come, if we're traveling to areas where there are diseases that are endemic, like for example TB, and we come back and we develop a cough, or we lose a lot of weight, or we're developing fever at night, mention those things to your family doctor. Other things like malaria you can come back with fevers, etc. Hepatitis, whether it's hepatitis A or B, you just be aware that if your eyeballs are turning yellow, that is something that we call jaundice. That could be related to your travel. And again, through the COVID times, a new persistent cough, some flu-like illness, or an alteration in your taste or your smell. These are sort of your classic signs that we need to look out for. So it doesn't just end with coming back. We need to have proper rest and recuperation, and we also need to be aware that we could, be exposed to things that could be developed into illnesses once we're back. So I'll finish there.
Sorry, Brother Naveed, can I ask one question?
Yes.
Yes, first of all, thank you so much for such a detailed explanation of all the aspects of traveling. You have really enlightened us so much, as always. Just one thing, while we are on long haul flights, the thing DVT, yes. How to take care of that and look into that so that we avoid getting.
Very, very good. So for people who are at higher risk of what's a DVT, or a deep vein thrombosis, or a clot that can form in our calves normally, but it can be in other places, is people who are at higher risk, we recommend that they have a particular, or they have a special type of stocking, again, which you can get from your chemist, or you can ask your doctor. You can get special stockings which help compress the veins in the leg. But on top of that, for any journey over 4 or 5 hours, even a long coach journey or a long train journey, we would recommend that people regularly get up and walk around a little bit. I know it's more difficult now to do that in aeroplanes, because we prefer people to stay seated. But if you can, walk around on these long journeys. Failing that, just do some regular sort of exercises, sitting exercises with your legs. So keeping them active, stretching them, bending them, and occasionally just caressing the back of your calves. So these types of things are things that we can do that can mitigate against these developing these blood clots, which can be serious, as you mentioned, Farzana. So thank you for mentioning that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for informing us. Thank you so much.
Are there any more quick questions? We do have 1 minute left. I mean, there were quite a few. There's another one on menstruation, but I think it was to do with the norethistone tablet, whether that's suitable to be used. But you mentioned,
I mean, it is suitable for people, but again, I would recommend, I'm not going to tell you you need to go and take that. My recommendation is to have a conversation with your family doctor who knows you, who knows your health needs, and who knows if you are on medication, what would work best for you. So again, and that's a way of letting them know that you're traveling, and again, that conversation is important. And again, doing that a month or 2 before travel is quite important.
and another question is that, can you travel to Hajj and Umrah without the vaccine?
No, not at the moment.
Yeah.
So just like meningitis is mandatory, meningitis vaccine rather, is mandatory for travel for Hajj or Umrah, I would assume that in the coming years, COVID vaccine or regular COVID vaccine will probably be mandatory alongside your meningitis. And again, for other people who are at high risk, your regular annual flu jab is really important as well.
Do you have enough time, Dr. Naveed? Do you have to go to another talk, or can we finish the questions on here?
I've got a couple of minutes left, so that's fine, inshallah.
I mean, there's a kind of a philosophical one, that do you think people are being penalized through stopping them traveling without the vaccine? Is it morally and ethically wrong?
I mean, we've never had a problem for 20 years when the Saudi authorities have said you need to have a meningitis vaccine to come for Hajj or Umrah. We accept that. So traveling is it's a luxury, and we forget that. Our parents' generation, when they first embarked upon traveling, it was something that only the elite did, and yes, it's become more normalized for us up until recently, but we should still recognize what an extremely privileged position we are in here to be able to travel. If your travel operators say we need this, then that's fine. They're not doing it to penalize people. They're doing it to create a safe environment for people to travel, those that need to travel. Much like if we're booking into a restaurant or a hotel, again, and that's another thing that I would recommend, is if you are eating out, again, it's just making sure that you plan ahead, go on their website, do they have all the right COVID security measures in? Do the waiters, when you're looking for someone to eat, do the waiters look neat and tidy? Are they wearing the face mask? Are they wearing the masks properly? Is the regime in the hotel or the restaurant one that ensures that all their staff have COVID secure measures? Because you can get a sense of reassurance that if they are taking these things seriously, then they are likely to be taking other measures seriously. So it acts as a proxy. So these things are important. If you look around and people are wearing a mask under their chin, then I would say, well, maybe they're not prioritizing that so importantly. So I would step back from those establishments.
Absolutely. One final question is that how long do you think these restrictions will be in place? Do you foresee another lockdown due to the travel bans being lifted? What do you think?
I can't honestly say. It's a difficult one, because with the recent Delta variant that is spreading so much throughout the UK, that originated in India, we don't know how that's going to affect a further wave, and how that's going to interact with people that have been vaccinated or not vaccinated, and what that's going to mean for the lockdown. These are things that a lot of experts are poring over at the moment. So I'm not in a position to give any sensible predictions. What I do know is that a lot of the scientists that are involved in that decision making will give the best advice to the government, and then we have to put trust in the government that they make the decisions for the right reasons, for the best for the population.
Okay.
That's all I'm allowed to say on that.
I understand completely. Jazakallah khair so much. I mean, this is just a wealth of information that you've given us. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. I think this would go on for another hour.
Yes, indeed.
It is a very good topic. Very
well,
important.
inshallah, thank you for inviting me, and I hope it's been of benefit. And again, if people just go away with that checklist of the essential things they need to go with, then in public health, prevention is better than cure. So that's job done, hopefully, inshallah.
Thank you so much, Brother Naveed. Thank you so much.
Jazakallah khair.
We hope you found our session today useful. Were you about to say something, Sister Farzana?
No, nothing. I was just saying thank you. It has been really very enlightening. Brother Naveed covered all the areas, all the aspects of traveling, health, and issue. Alhamdulillah.
If anyone would like to offer feedback on this session or suggest any workshops for the future, please get in touch via the email mentioned, or join the WhatsApp group via the link on the poster. Thank you, Dr. Naveed, for sharing your knowledge with us, and thank you, Sister Farzana, and everybody else for your support.
Thank you very much. Also.
Assalamu alaikum.